I stood in our doorway, suitcase still in hand, as my husband nervously explained that his ex needed a place to stay. Her clothes already hanging in our shared closet where my dresses used to be. Just 2 weeks ago, everything was normal. The Uber pulled into our driveway at 9:17 p.m., headlights briefly illuminating an unfamiliar silver Audi parked where my car should have been. Exhaustion from the 3-day business trip momentarily clouded my suspicion as I rolled my suitcase up the walkway, mentally cataloging the presentation successes that had likely secured my promotion. I noticed the curtains had been changed before I even unlocked the door. The soft cream panels I'd selected last spring replaced by bold burgundy drapes I'd never seen before. Small detail, but immediate warning. The living room lights were dimmed low, the unfamiliar sound of a reality show drifting from our television. Michael never watched reality TV. The subtle scent of an unfamiliar perfume hung in the air. Floral, excessive, nothing I would wear. I stood in our entryway, perfectly still, absorbing these discordant details before making my presence known. The rational part of my brain already connecting dots, while the emotional side struggled to reject the obvious conclusion. "Michael," I called out, my voice steady despite the growing knot in my stomach. Hurried whispers from the kitchen, a chair scraping across tile. Then Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, guilt, and manufactured welcome. "Emma, you're back early." He stepped forward for an awkward hug that I neither returned nor rejected. "Not early," I corrected calmly. My flight was exactly as scheduled. Thursday evening, as I mentioned in my text yesterday. Right. I guess I lost track of the days." He ran a hand through his hair, his tell for lying since college. "How was the conference?" Before I could answer, she appeared behind him, Catherine Mitchell, his ex-girlfriend from before we met. The woman he'd claimed was ancient history whenever her name surfaced in conversation. "Emma," she acknowledged with practiced casualness, as if her presence in my home while I'd been away was perfectly normal. "Michael mentioned you were traveling for work." I surveyed her with clinical detachment. Designer jeans, expensive silk blouse, carefully tousled blonde hair. The burgundy drapes suddenly made sense. She'd always preferred dramatic colors, according to mutual friends. "Catherine," I replied, maintaining perfect composure, "this is unexpected." Michael stepped between us, hands raised in placating gesture. "I can explain. Catherine's apartment had a major pipe burst 3 days ago. Everything was flooded, unlivable. She needed a place to stay temporarily, and I couldn't just leave her without options." "Of course not," I agreed, tone neutral as I cataloged the inconsistencies. The silver Audi looked far from temporary. The burgundy drapes weren't emergency accommodations. The perfume had permeated too deeply for a 3-day stay. Catherine smiled with calculated sympathy. "I know this must be awkward. I told Michael it would be, but he insisted you wouldn't mind helping out an old friend in crisis." Friend. An interesting characterization for someone Michael had only ever described as complicated and intense during our 5 years together. "How thoughtful of him," I replied. "An unfortunate timing with my trip." "Completely coincidental," Michael assured too quickly. "Her apartment flooded the day after you left." I nodded, watching Catherine's expression carefully. The slight tension around her eyes, the barely perceptible smirk, she was enjoying this. Not the behavior of someone experiencing a genuine housing crisis. "I've got your favorite wine," Michael offered, desperate to normalize the situation. "Why don't we all sit down and I'll explain everything properly?" "Actually, I'm exhausted from the flight," I declined smoothly. "I'm going to shower and unpack." I rolled my suitcase toward our bedroom, cataloging more changes as I moved through the house. Catherine's coat draped over our reading chair, a different throw blanket on the couch, unfamiliar mugs in the sink. The bedroom revealed more evidence. The dresser had been reorganized, my things compressed to make room. The bathroom counter displayed makeup products that weren't mine, arranged with comfortable familiarity rather than guest politeness. I closed the door and leaned against it, allowing myself exactly 30 seconds of pure shock before compartmentalizing emotions to think strategically. This wasn't a temporary emergency accommodation. This was calculated, intentional, and based on the level of comfort Catherine displayed, not a recent development. The shower provided privacy to process initial observations while planning immediate steps. Michael's behavior indicated guilt but not remorse. He was sorry to be caught, not sorry for the act itself. Catherine's territorial marking of our home suggested she viewed her position as already established. Most revealing was the timing. My quarterly business trip had been scheduled for months. An experienced professional like Catherine, who managed luxury real estate according to her social media, would have extensive insurance and immediate accommodation options for housing emergencies. After showering, I changed into comfortable clothes and carefully arranged my expression into tired acceptance before rejoining them in the living room. Catherine had claimed my usual spot on the couch, Michael sitting closer to her than strictly necessary for conversation. "Feeling better?" Michael asked with false brightness. "Much," I confirmed, selecting the armchair furthest from them. "So, Catherine, tell me about this flooding situation. Did your insurance company arrange temporary housing?" A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "There were complications with the policy. Michael has been incredibly helpful." "He always did enjoy playing hero," I observed, watching Michael's discomfort grow. "When do you expect repairs to be completed?" "Hard to say," she replied vaguely. "These things can take weeks, but don't worry, I won't impose any longer than absolutely necessary." The practiced delivery suggested a rehearsed conversation, one they had anticipated having under different circumstances, perhaps with me properly notified in advance, the evidence better concealed. "Well, I'm sure we can make this work temporarily," I said, emphasizing the final word slightly. "Though I'll need my car back tomorrow for work." Michael looked confused. "Your car is in the garage." "There's an Audi in the driveway," I pointed out. "That's mine," Catherine interjected quickly. "I couldn't leave it on the street." Of course. The garage remote would give her unrestricted access to our home. A car on the driveway would be noticed by neighbors. Strategic decisions revealing premeditation. I smiled politely. "I see. Well, I'm still jet-lagged from the trip. I think I'll turn in early." In the bedroom, I quietly documented the changes with my phone camera, while Michael and Catherine continued their hushed conversation in the living room, not acting from emotion but methodically gathering information, noting inconsistencies, identifying patterns. Later, as Michael slipped into bed beside me, maintaining careful distance, I feigned sleep while cataloging options. The property deed required investigation, financial accounts needed review, security measures warranted assessment. "Emma," he whispered tentatively, "are you awake?" I regulated my breathing, providing no response. Michael sighed, relieved to postpone the inevitable confrontation. He had no idea what was coming. Because while he saw a compliant wife accepting an outrageous imposition, I was already planning my strategic response. This wasn't the first time Michael had tested boundaries with convenient half-truths, but I would ensure it was the last. At 3:17 a.m., I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Michael's sleeping form. Years of accommodation had trained him to expect my compliance, making my apparent acceptance of Catherine's presence entirely believable to him. This misplaced confidence would work to my advantage. I moved silently through our darkened house, phone flashlight carefully shielded as I documented each territorial alteration Catherine had implemented. The burgundy drapes, rearranged bookshelves, family photos subtly repositioned to make room for new items, including a framed picture of Catherine and Michael I'd never seen before, tucked partially behind a potted plant, as if waiting for the right moment to claim prominent display. In the kitchen, I photographed the refrigerator contents: new brands of yogurt, specialty coffee creamer, expensive mineral water. The pantry revealed similar changes: organic grain products Michael had never shown interest in, imported teas arranged with familiar precision. This wasn't emergency accommodation. This was systematic integration. Michael's wallet lay carelessly on the counter. A deliberate inspection revealed 4 restaurant receipts from local establishments during my 3-day absence. Romantic dinners rather than emergency meals, based on the wine charges and dessert selections. I photographed each one before returning the wallet exactly as I'd found it. Most revealing was Catherine's purse, left prominently on the entryway table. The calculated casualness of its placement suggested established comfort rather than temporary residence. I didn't disturb its contents. Direct invasion would be too easily detected, but noted the designer brand and recent purchase date based on the seasonal collection tag. Housing crisis victims rarely prioritize luxury accessories. Back in our home office, I powered on my laptop, enabling privacy screens to minimize light and sound. Our shared calendar revealed strategic deletions, my business trip highlighted, but several mysterious gaps in Michael's schedule over the preceding weeks. Times when he'd claimed late meetings or client dinners. A careful review of our joint bank account revealed the pattern. Multiple charges at upscale restaurants on evenings he'd been supposedly working late. Boutique hotel charges carefully categorized as client accommodations. Cash withdrawals with no corresponding explanations. I documented everything methodically, creating secure backups on encrypted cloud storage only I could access. Not acting from emotional impulse, but building a comprehensive record of deception. My separate financial accounts remained untouched. Michael had always maintained his role as primary provider despite my substantial income. Another control mechanism I'd recognized but strategically accommodated, ensuring my personal finances remained secure from his influence. Social media provided additional confirmation. Though neither Michael nor Catherine had posted explicit content about their renewed connection, mutual friends' photos from group gatherings during the past 3 months frequently showed them together in background images. Subtle proximity that couldn't be coincidental. More telling were location tags. Both had checked into the same restaurants, events, and locations multiple times, often on evenings when Michael had claimed work commitments. The home security system offered irrefutable evidence. I downloaded footage from our doorbell camera for the past month, methodically reviewing timestamps that aligned with my previous work trips and late office hours. Catherine's first appearance at our door, not 3 days ago during a supposed emergency, but 4 weeks earlier when I'd traveled overnight for a client presentation. Michael greeting her with familiar intimacy rather than emergency concern. Multiple visits establishing a clear pattern of planned deception. Most damning was footage from the night before my return, Catherine arriving with multiple suitcases and clothing bags, Michael helping her unload them from her Audi. The choreographed efficiency of their movements, indicating a planned move rather than emergency response. I documented everything with meticulous precision, organizing evidence chronologically to establish the progression from occasional visits to systematic integration into our home. By 5:30 a.m., I had compiled a comprehensive record that dismantled every aspect of their convenient narrative: the pipe burst emergency, the temporary accommodation story, the coincidental timing, all methodically disproven through tangible evidence. As dawnlight began filtering through the unfamiliar burgundy drapes, I implemented immediate security measures, changing passwords on my personal accounts, securing important documents, transferring recent photographs to protected storage. Then I researched property records for our home. The substantial down payment had come primarily from my savings, but whose name was on the deed? The information would be crucial for developing effective strategy. Michael stirred around 6:45 a.m., emerging from the bedroom to find me calmly drinking coffee at the kitchen island, dressed for work, laptop open to innocuous emails. "You're up early," he observed cautiously. "Conference follow-up," I explained with practiced normalcy. "East Coast clients already expecting updates." He nodded, visibly relieved at my apparent focus on work, rather than our home situation. "About Catherine." "We can discuss it later," I interrupted smoothly. "I've got early meetings today. Probably won't be home until after 7. "Oh." His surprise at my easy dismissal was evident. "I'll probably grab dinner with the guys then." The guys, another convenient fiction. I merely nodded, maintaining the performance of distracted professional focus. "Will Catherine be joining you?" I asked casually, watching his expression carefully. "Probably not," he replied too quickly. "She mentioned shopping for replacement things, insurance paperwork, you know." Of course, I gathered my laptop and portfolio. Her situation must be incredibly stressful. The irony seemed entirely lost on him. "Exactly. Thanks for being so understanding, Emma." I offered a neutral smile, collecting my keys. "I should be going. Heavy traffic this morning." As I drove to work, I placed a carefully timed call to my close friend Diane, the only person in our social circle unconnected to Michael's network. Her legal background and uncompromising loyalty made her the perfect confidant for initial strategy development. "Can we meet for lunch?" I asked without preamble. "I need objective perspective on a significant situation." Her immediate agreement came without invasive questions, one of many reasons I valued her friendship. At the office, I maintained perfect professional composure while making 3 essential calls during breaks between meetings. First, to a private investigator recommended by Diane years earlier during her own divorce. Second, to my personal financial advisor to discuss immediate asset protection options. Third, to schedule comprehensive security system upgrades for installation during my next identified window of opportunity. Lunch with Diane provided the first opportunity to verbalize what I'd discovered. My account delivered with factual precision rather than emotional indulgence. "You're handling this with remarkable composure," she observed after reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. "Most people would be falling apart." "Emotional reactions won't improve the situation," I replied simply. "What's your next step?" "Information gathering," I explained, understanding exactly what I'm dealing with before determining appropriate response. Her expression reflected approval. "Smart approach. What can I do?" "Property law consultation," I requested. "I need to understand my position regarding the house before proceeding." She nodded, already making notes. "I'll connect you with Sarah Harrison, best property attorney in the state. And Emma?" "Yes?" "Document everything, every conversation, every observation, every financial move." I allowed myself a small smile, already implementing that protocol. By evening, I had established preliminary security measures, initiated professional consultations, and designed a comprehensive investigation strategy, not operating from emotional reaction, but methodical determination. When I returned home that evening, Catherine and Michael were in the kitchen, their conversation halting abruptly at my arrival, the performance of casual friendship immediately replacing whatever discussion had preceded my entrance. "Emma," Catherine greeted with practiced warmth. Michael was just helping me navigate insurance paperwork. Such a nightmare after water damage. "I imagine so," I agreed pleasantly, setting my laptop case on the counter. "Though fortunately, your specialty in luxury real estate management should provide excellent industry contacts for expedited repairs." Her momentary hesitation confirmed my suspicion. She hadn't expected me to know her professional background, information she'd assumed Michael hadn't shared, details I'd never mentioned during our limited previous interactions. "Yes," she recovered quickly. "Though even with connections, these things take time." "Of course," I acknowledged. "Fortunately, we have time." Michael glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable with undertones he couldn't quite identify. I maintained the performance of accommodating spouse throughout dinner, observing their interactions with analytical detachment. The familiar gestures, the inside jokes, the comfortable physical proximity refined through practice rather than recently established. Later, as Michael showered, Catherine approached me directly, her expression carefully arranged into apologetic sincerity. "I really appreciate your understanding, Emma. Many women wouldn't be so accommodating about their husband's ex staying over." I met her gaze with measured calm. "We all need support during unexpected crises." Something in my tone made her study me more carefully. "Michael always said you were uniquely reasonable." "Did he?" I replied mildly. "How interesting that you've discussed me so thoroughly." Before she could respond, I excused myself to prepare for an early meeting the following day. The evidence was mounting, the strategy developing, the path forward becoming increasingly clear. Michael believed he was managing the situation perfectly. Catherine thought she was reclaiming territory with calculated precision. Neither understood what they had actually initiated. Sarah Harrison's office projected exactly the professional confidence I required. Modern furnishings suggesting success without ostentation. Wall certificates establishing expertise rather than seeking to impress. Her manner brisk and analytical, rather than sympathetically indulgent. "These property records are unambiguous," she confirmed, reviewing the documentation I'd provided during our Thursday morning meeting. "The house is solely in your name. Your husband is not on the deed, mortgage, or any associated legal documents." "Explain the implications," I requested, though I'd already anticipated her response. "Legally, you have exclusive right to determine residency," Sarah explained. Your husband's occupancy is permitted through marriage, but he cannot extend that permission to third parties without your consent. His ex-girlfriend has no legal right to remain in the property against your wishes. I nodded, absorbing the confirmation of my position. And the renovation expenses he's contributed? Without formal documentation, those are considered gifts or contributions to the marital household, not equity investments. They don't confer ownership rights. Precisely as I'd calculated when purchasing the property 3 years earlier. Michael had insisted on maintaining separate financial identities, while happily contributing to improvements that increased property value. His name absence from legal documents had been his own requirement, supposedly protecting his existing assets. The irony wasn't lost on me. "What documentation do you recommend?" I asked, already planning next steps. Sarah provided specific recommendations: formal communications, evidence preservation protocols, security measures to implement immediately. Each suggestion aligned with my existing strategy while adding valuable legal framework. "Based on the evidence you've presented," she concluded, "you're in an exceptionally strong position. Most clients arrive with emotional chaos and minimal documentation. You've provided comprehensive records establishing a clear pattern of deception." "I prefer strategic response to emotional reaction," I explained simply. Her approving nod suggested similar personal philosophy. "One final recommendation: secure your most valuable and irreplaceable items immediately. Regardless of legal rights, betrayed partners often retaliate against property when confronted." I left her office with clear direction and reinforced confidence in my position. Michael had miscalculated catastrophically, assuming shared residence equated to shared ownership. Catherine had overplayed her integration strategy, failing to investigate the property's legal status before establishing territorial claims. Their combined arrogance would prove their undoing. My next meeting provided additional strategic advantage. James Whitman, financial security consultant, reviewed my documentation with professional detachment before outlining immediate protective measures. "Given your separate accounts and minimal joint assets, financial disentanglement should be straightforward," he confirmed. "I recommend immediate implementation of these security protocols." The list included measures I'd already initiated: password changes, credit monitoring, document securing, along with additional protections I hadn't considered. "What about the joint household account?" I inquired, referring to our shared expense fund. "Based on contribution patterns, approximately 70% came from your income, despite his higher salary," James noted, reviewing the spreadsheets I'd provided. "Legally entitled to withdraw your proportional contribution immediately without notice." Another miscalculation on Michael's part, insisting I contribute substantially to household expenses while maintaining separate accounts, had created clear documentation of my financial investment. His preference for appearing generous through visible purchases rather than consistent contributions had left a traceable pattern of disproportionate responsibility. I implemented the recommended financial security measures immediately following our meeting, transferring my proportional contributions from joint accounts to newly established secure holdings, not emptying accounts, which could appear vindictive, but precisely reclaiming my documented investment. By afternoon, I had secured property documentation, implemented financial protections, and consulted with security specialists regarding immediate system upgrades. Each step methodically documented, each decision strategically calculated. The private investigator's preliminary report arrived via encrypted email, confirmation of Michael and Catherine's relationship timeline, extending at least 6 months prior to her supposed emergency arrival. Credit card records showing hotel stays, restaurant charges, weekend getaways carefully disguised as business travel. Most revealing was confirmation of Catherine's current apartment status. No record of any flooding event, maintenance requests, or insurance claims. Her building management confirmed normal occupancy status with no reported issues. Her calculated emergency entirely fabricated. I added this documentation to my secured evidence file, building a comprehensive case that dismantled every aspect of their deception. The final preparation phase required careful implementation of home security upgrades, additional cameras, improved monitoring systems, secure cloud storage of all footage, scheduled for installation during Michael and Catherine's transparently coordinated separate evening plans the following day. Throughout these preparations, I maintained perfect performance at home, presenting the appearance of distracted accommodation, strategic work commitments limiting my presence, careful observation documenting their increasing comfort with the arrangement. Catherine's territorial expansion continued, more clothing appearing in closets, personal items claiming bathroom space, subtle rearrangement of kitchen organization. Michael's enabling behavior becoming increasingly transparent as he facilitated her integration, while maintaining the emergency accommodation narrative. Catherine's landlord says the repairs might take another few weeks, he mentioned casually over breakfast, testing my continued acceptance. How unfortunate, I replied neutrally, noting the timeline extension for documentation purposes. Insurance coverage should provide hotel accommodation. Catherine interjected smoothly, having clearly anticipated this logical response. There are policy complications, something about pre-existing conditions in the building's plumbing system. Another convenient fiction, I merely nodded, maintaining the appearance of distracted acceptance while mentally calculating timeline adjustments to my strategy. I truly appreciate your understanding, Emma, she added, her practiced sincerity increasingly transparent. Not many women would be so accommodating about their husband's ex staying over. The second time she'd used that exact phrasing, rehearsed talking points rather than genuine appreciation, I offered non-committal acknowledgement while documenting the repetition pattern. That evening, I implemented the final preparation phase, securing irreplaceable personal items and documents in a newly established safety deposit box, installing discrete recording devices in common areas, and backing up all security footage to protected cloud storage. Not acting from emotional impulse, but methodically establishing comprehensive security measures before implementing the next strategic phase. The bedroom provided the most revealing evidence of their progressive comfort. Catherine's belongings now occupied nearly half the closet space, arranged with permanent residence indicators rather than temporary accommodation organization. The bathroom similarly transformed with her products claiming prime counterpositions, my items increasingly marginalized. When Michael returned from his suspiciously lengthy grocery run, Catherine conveniently absent on equally transparent errands, I maintained neutral conversation while completing final preparation tasks. We should discuss a more formal timeline for Catherine's situation, I suggested casually, observing his immediate tension. She's really stuck right now, he defended quickly. The landlord is being difficult about repair schedules. Perhaps we should contact them directly, I offered. My company has excellent legal resources for tenant issues. His momentary panic confirmed my suspicions entirely. No need to involve your work. Catherine has it under control. Of course, I acknowledged, allowing the subject to drop while noting his reaction for documentation purposes. That night, as Michael slept beside me, I finalized arrangements with Diane for implementation support during the next phase. Her immediate willingness to assist without excessive questions demonstrated the value of strategic alliance cultivation. Just tell me when and where, she confirmed via text. Ready when you are. By morning, all preparations were complete, legal position confirmed, financial assets secured, evidence documented, security measures implemented, support network activated, each element carefully coordinated for maximum strategic advantage. Michael and Catherine's coordinated separate evening plans for Friday provided the perfect opportunity for final systems implementation. Their transparent attempts at creating plausible deniability, different departure times, manufactured separate destinations, coordinated return timeline, further documented their calculated deception. Don't wait up, Michael suggested as he prepared to leave. Client dinner might run late. Enjoy your evening, I replied, maintaining perfect performance of oblivious accommodation. As their vehicles departed, separate directions initially before inevitably converging beyond neighborhood visibility, I activated the comprehensive security system upgrades, ensuring complete monitoring and documentation of all property areas. The strategic foundation was established, the evidence secured, the legal position confirmed. Michael and Catherine believed they were expertly managing a gradual transition, from emergency accommodation to permanent arrangement, from temporary presence to established residence, from deceptive narrative to accepted reality. They had no concept of what awaited their return, the calculated displacement they had orchestrated, was about to be methodically dismantled through strategic precision they hadn't anticipated. Their arrogance would be their undoing. Saturday morning arrived with perfect strategic timing. Michael and Catherine returned separately after their independent evening activities, maintaining the increasingly transparent charade of coincidental schedules. Both appeared slightly disheveled, the coordination of their arrival times suggesting practiced routine rather than genuine separation. I greeted them with coffee and casual conversation, my composed demeanor providing no indication of imminent disruption. Their visible relief at my continued accommodation only confirmed the efficacy of my performance. "Any plans today?" Michael asked, settling into weekend normalcy as if nothing were amiss. "Actually, yes," I replied pleasantly. "I've invited my parents for dinner tonight." The effect was immediate, alarm flickering across both their faces before hastily concealed. My parents' unexpected introduction to their living arrangement clearly hadn't factored into their calculated timeline. "Tonight?" Michael repeated, coffee cup suspended halfway to his lips. "But Catherine's situation will make perfect sense to them," I finished smoothly. "They've always been understanding about helping people in crisis." Catherine recovered quickly, practice performance resuming. "That's really not necessary. I can make myself scarce, maybe stay with a friend." "Nonsense," I insisted, with calculated firmness. "You're staying here because of an emergency. My parents will completely understand once the situation is explained clearly." The subtext hung unmistakably in the air. Their deception would require public performance, their narrative scrutinized by objective observers. The carefully controlled environment they'd established, suddenly introducing external variables. Michael attempted recovery. "Maybe we should wait until things are more settled." "They're looking forward to seeing you," I interrupted, checking my watch with deliberate casualness. "Arriving around 5. If you'll excuse me, I have a few errands before then." I left them exchanging worried glances. My first strategic move implemented flawlessly, not confrontation yet, merely controlled destabilization of their comfortable deception. While shopping for dinner ingredients, I confirmed final preparations with Diane. Her role in tonight's strategic implementation was crucial, her timing requiring perfect coordination with my parents' arrival. "Everything's arranged," she confirmed via text. "Documents ready, timing confirmed." Back home, I found Catherine rearranging her belongings, attempting to minimize visible evidence of permanent residency. Michael hovered anxiously, their previously comfortable dynamic replaced by nervous tension. "Need any help preparing dinner?" he offered. Transparent attempt at normalizing the increasingly unstable situation. "Everything's under control," I assured him, maintaining composed efficiency while implementing each phase of my planned sequence. At precisely 4:30 p.m., the strategy accelerated. My phone rang. A scheduled call from my bank, confirming the major transactions I'd initiated that morning. "Yes, that's correct," I confirmed, voice deliberately audible as I stood in the kitchen. The transfer from the joint household account to my personal account, 70% of the balance, matching my documented contributions. Michael's head snapped up from his laptop, alarm replacing casual disinterest. "What transfer?" he demanded as I ended the call. "Financial reorganization," I explained calmly. "Nothing concerning, just proper documentation of proportional contributions." Before he could respond, his phone chimed with the automatic alert I knew would follow. Notification of the substantial withdrawal from our joint account. His expression transformed from confusion to disbelief as he verified the transaction. "You took 70% of our household money?" His voice rose slightly. "Without discussing it." "I reclaimed my documented contributions," I corrected, continuing dinner preparations without breaking rhythm. "The transaction record clearly identifies my deposits versus yours. Everything is properly proportioned." Catherine watched from the doorway, calculating gaze assessing the shifting dynamic. The financial move clearly registered as deliberate strategy rather than emotional reaction, her expression revealing recalibration of her previous assessment. Michael's confusion quickly turned to indignation. "You can't just move money without discussion. That's our joint account." "Was our joint account," I corrected gently. "The new arrangement better reflects individual contributions and responsibilities." Before he could escalate further, the doorbell rang. My parents arriving precisely on schedule. the confrontation necessarily postponed by public appearance requirements. "We'll discuss this later," Michael hissed, composing his expression for greeting my parents. My mother embraced me warmly while my father shook Michael's hand. The introductions to Catherine unfolded exactly as anticipated. Initial confusion followed by careful observation as Michael stumbled through his emergency accommodation explanation. "So you're staying here temporarily?" my mother clarified, her attorney's precision defining terms with subtle emphasis. "Just until my apartment is habitable again," Catherine confirmed, performance polished yet increasingly strained under direct questioning. The doorbell rang again, right on cue. Diane's arrival with a portfolio of work documents needing immediate signature provided the perfect cover for introducing the property documentation into the evening sequence. "I'll just need a few signatures," she explained, spreading papers across the dining table with deliberate organization. "Property tax confirmation, renovation permit applications." The deed to the house lay prominently displayed among the documents, my name clearly identified as sole owner, the purchase date and legal details unmistakably documented. Michael froze mid-conversation, his gaze locked on the property deed he'd never actually reviewed. The foundation of his assumption that our shared residence equated to shared ownership, visibly crumbling as reality registered. Catherine's expression shifted simultaneously, calculation replacing confidence as she processed the strategic implications. Her careful integration into a home she now realized belonged solely to me represented profound miscalculation. My father, retired banking executive with perfect situational awareness, smoothly directed conversation away from Michael's visible discomfort. My mother, equally perceptive, engaged Catherine in detailed questions about her supposed apartment emergency. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably, the first strategic move executed with precision. And this was merely the beginning. The days following my parents' visit proceeded with calculated precision, each strategic element activating in carefully timed sequence. Michael's desperate attempts to re-establish control proved increasingly ineffective against my methodical dismantling of their deception. "We need to discuss what happened Saturday night," he insisted Sunday morning, his tone attempting authority, while his expression revealed growing anxiety. "Which aspect specifically?" I inquired with perfect composure. "The financial reallocation? The property ownership clarification? Or Catherine's increasingly permanent housing arrangement?" His struggle to prioritize concerns only highlighted his strategic disadvantage. "All of it. Moving money without discussion, bringing your parents over without proper warning. Similar to moving your ex-girlfriend in without proper discussion," I observed mildly. "Interesting parallel." Catherine maintained strategic distance during these exchanges, her presence in common areas noticeably reduced as she reassessed her position. The territorial confidence that had characterized her earlier behavior replaced by calculated observation. Monday morning accelerated the strategic sequence. The certified letter I'd arranged arrived during breakfast, formal notification from my attorney regarding property occupancy requirements and guest accommodation limitations. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he read the precisely worded legal document. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, waving the paper. "Legal notification about who can live in our house." "My house," I corrected gently, "as documented in the property deed. The notification simply clarifies occupancy parameters." Catherine appeared in the doorway, expression tightly controlled. "Is this an eviction notice?" "Merely legal clarification," I explained, maintaining composed professionalism, establishing clear parameters regarding unauthorized resident integration. Their exchange of glances confirmed growing realization of their strategic vulnerability. The emergency accommodation narrative that had provided thin cover for their arrangement, now collapsing under legal scrutiny. By Tuesday, the social dimension entered calculated acceleration. Sharon, Michael's sister, called while I was preparing dinner, her speakerphone conversation clearly audible. "What's this mom's telling me about Catherine living with you guys?" she asked without preamble. "Your ex-girlfriend is staying in your house with your wife?" Michael's panicked glance toward me confirmed his recognition of expanding consequences, the contained deception now spreading beyond controlled parameters. "It's temporary," he insisted, voice lowered despite speakerphone status. "Emergency situation with her apartment." That's not what Catherine's Instagram suggests, Sharon countered skeptically. Her posts make it look pretty settled. And since when does she even talk to you again? Last I heard you two weren't even on speaking terms. The social media evidence I documented now circulating independently. External verification reinforcing my documented timeline. Michael's attempts at damage control grew increasingly desperate as reality expanded beyond his narrative management capabilities. Wednesday brought the financial dimension into sharper focus. The mortgage payment cleared from my separate account rather than our joint housing fund, notification triggering immediate response. You paid the mortgage from your personal account? Michael questioned. Transparent attempt at regaining financial involvement. Proper alignment of property responsibility, I explained simply. The deed clarifies ownership parameters. His frustration visibly mounted. This is still our home, regardless of whose name is on the paperwork. Legal documentation defines residence authorization, I countered calmly. Currently being reviewed regarding unauthorized occupancy expansion. Catherine's measured retreat accelerated visibly, personal items gradually disappearing from common spaces, territorial markers systematically withdrawing as strategic assessment shifted from expansion to extraction. By Thursday, social consequences expanded beyond Michael's containment capabilities. Calls from mutual friends increased, initially cautious inquiries evolving into direct questioning as multiple information sources confirmed the situation's reality. So Catherine is actually living with you guys now? Robert asked during Michael's speakerphone conversation. That's an unusual arrangement. Michael's desperate attempt at casual dismissal only emphasized the narrative's collapse. It's a temporary thing, apartment emergency. For 6 months? Robert questioned skeptically. Because she's been posting your address as her location since February. The timeline confirmation, precisely matching my documented evidence, shattered another support pillar of their deception. Michael's attempts at explanation, growing increasingly fragmented as external verification undermined every narrative element. Friday's calculated escalation targeted professional dimensions. Michael's office voice message light blinked persistently when he returned home. His assistant's message playing as Catherine entered the kitchen. Just confirming your RSVP for the partner dinner next Saturday. The invitation addressed both you and Emma, but there's been some confusion since Catherine mentioned attending as your guest at last month's client reception. His immediate panic as the message played reflected recognition of professional boundary dissolution. The separate compartments he'd maintained now collapsing as evidence emerged in previously protected contexts. It's not what it sounds like, he insisted desperately, watching my continued dinner preparation with growing alarm. The partner dinner invitation, I inquired with deliberate misunderstanding. I received the official email directly, black tie optional, 7 p.m. at the Madison Hotel. His relief at my apparent misinterpretation quickly dissolved as I continued. Interesting that Catherine represented herself as your guest at the previous function. I was presenting at the Chicago conference that weekend, if I recall correctly. Catherine's expression reflected strategic reassessment, her calculated integration now unraveling across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The confidence that had characterized her territorial expansion replaced by visible recalibration. Saturday morning brought the strategic sequence to calculated inflection point. The property inspection I'd scheduled months earlier, legitimately required for insurance renewal but strategically timed for maximum impact, brought official documentation into shared space. The inspector will need access to all areas, I explained calmly over breakfast, including closets, storage spaces, and all occupied bedrooms. Michael's alarm registered immediately. Today isn't a good time to have strangers going through our personal things. Insurance requirements operate independently of personal preference, I noted. Policy renewal contingent on completed inspection. Catherine's accelerated gathering of personal items confirmed her recognition of shifting dynamics. The previously casual integration now frantically reassembled into temporary guest appearance. By evening, their coordinated narrative had unraveled completely. Michael's desperate attempts at reestablishing control undermined by external verification across multiple dimensions. Catherine's territorial confidence replaced by strategic withdrawal. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. The calculated deception they had orchestrated now systematically exposed through methodical implementation rather than emotional confrontation. Their unraveling proceeded exactly according to strategic design, not through dramatic confrontation, but precise dismantling of foundational assumptions. The stage was perfectly set for the final phase. Sunday evening arrived with perfect atmospheric tension, steady rainfall, providing appropriate backdrop for the culmination of my strategic sequence. Michael and Catherine had spent the day in increasingly strained coordination, their previously seamless partnership now fractured by escalating consequences. I moved through final preparation phases with methodical precision. Dinner arranged with careful attention to presentation, wine selected for strategic rather than culinary purposes, documentation organized for maximum impact. "Something smells amazing," Michael observed cautiously, entering the kitchen with transparent attempt at normalizing the increasingly unstable situation. "Beef bourguignon," I confirmed pleasantly, "your favorite for special occasions." His momentary relief at apparent reconciliation gesture quickly dissolved as I continued. "I thought appropriate dining accompaniment for tonight's discussion would help maintain civilized parameters." Catherine appeared in the doorway, expression carefully neutral, though her body language betrayed heightened alertness. The territorial confidence that had characterized her initial integration replaced completely by defensive positioning. "Discussion," Michael questioned, tension evident beneath forced casualness. "Comprehensive situation assessment," I clarified, arranging serving dishes with deliberate precision. "Long overdue, wouldn't you agree?" Their exchanged glance confirmed strategic disadvantage. Neither controlling timing nor context of the confrontation they had recognized was inevitable. My composed preparation contrasting sharply with their reactive uncertainty. Dinner proceeded with carefully orchestrated conversation, neutral topics maintaining surface civility, while underlying tension built systematically. Wine glasses refilled at calculated intervals, comfortable familiarity establishing false security parameters before strategic implementation. "This reminds me of that restaurant in Napa," Catherine observed, transparent attempt at establishing historical narrative positioning. "Remember that weekend, Michael, the vineyard tour?" 6 months ago, I confirmed pleasantly, their surprise at my knowledge immediately evident. February 17th to 19th specifically, while I attended the Chicago Marketing Conference. Michael's wine glass froze halfway to his lips. "How did you know about your romantic weekend disguised as a client meeting?" I completed calmly. "The same way I know about the hotel stays, restaurant dinners, and coordinated schedule arrangements extending back approximately 9 months. The silence that followed carried perfect strategic weight, neither denial nor explanation immediately available as they processed the comprehensive knowledge revelation. "It's not what you think," Michael attempted finally, desperation undermining his practiced sincerity. "It's precisely what evidence confirms," I corrected gently, retrieving the portfolio I'd positioned nearby. "Perhaps review before continuing with narrative construction." The documentation I presented followed methodical organization, chronological evidence establishing relationship timeline, financial records documenting resource allocation, property information confirming legal parameters, and Catherine's apartment documentation disproving emergency claims. Most significant, I concluded as they reviewed the irrefutable evidence, is confirmation from Catherine's building management that no flooding event, maintenance emergency, or habitability issue has occurred. The supposed crisis necessitating immediate accommodation was entirely fabricated. Catherine's composed facade fractured first, calculation replacing performance. "You've been investigating us." "Documenting factual reality," I corrected. "Substantial difference from your narrative construction." Michael attempted desperate recovery. "We need to discuss this reasonably. Whatever you think happened is precisely what occurred," I interrupted smoothly. "Your relationship resumed approximately 9 months ago. Initial clandestine arrangements evolving into coordinated integration strategy, utilizing my business travel as implementation windows. The precision of my timeline visibly impacted their remaining defensive posture. The calculated introduction of Catherine into our home began not with an emergency 3 weeks ago, but with incremental belongings integration during my overnight business trips. The burgundy drapes purchased 2 months ago. Bathroom organization adjusted 6 weeks ago. closet space systematically reallocated during a progressive timeline. Michael's expression reflected dawning recognition of comprehensive documentation extent. You've known all along. Since arrival moment, I confirmed, though evidence compilation began immediately thereafter. Why the performance, Catherine demanded, calculation replacing pretense entirely. Why pretend acceptance for weeks? Strategic documentation requirements, I explained simply. Comprehensive evidence compilation necessitated methodical approach rather than emotional reaction. The final strategic element activated perfectly as my phone chimed with precisely timed notification. The security system alert I'd scheduled provided seamless transition to the confrontation's final phase. That's the perimeter notification, I observed, checking my phone with deliberate casualness. My parents arriving for witness documentation. Witness, Michael repeated, alarm replacing confusion. For formal occupancy termination proceedings, I confirmed, standing to answer the door. Legal documentation recommended third-party verification of notification delivery. Catherine's strategic assessment shifted visibly, calculation rapidly cycling through limited remaining options. This is ridiculous. You can't just evict people without proper process. Unauthorized occupants have limited protection under property law, I noted calmly, particularly when fraudulent premises established residency claims. My parents entered with perfect timing, their professional demeanors reflecting appropriate gravity for the proceedings. My father's banking background and mother's legal experience providing ideal witness credentials for formal documentation. Everything prepared, my father inquired, briefcase suggesting official capacity rather than parental intervention. Final phase implementation, I confirmed, retrieving the formal documentation package I'd prepared with Sarah Harrison's guidance. Michael's desperate attempt at authority reassertion crumbled against coordinated implementation. This is still my home, too. You can't just... Legal documentation confirms sole property ownership, my mother interrupted professionally. Unauthorized occupant introduction violated multiple cohabitation parameters. The formal eviction notice I presented to Catherine carried perfect legal construction. Immediate vacation requirements specified. Timeline parameters established. Consequences of non-compliance clearly detailed. This can't be legal, she protested, though her expression revealed recognition of comprehensive strategic defeat. Property law extensively consulted, I assured her. Documentation meticulously verified. Michael's final desperate attempt at narrative control emerged predictably. Emma, please, we need to discuss this privately, as husband and wife. Marital dissolution proceedings initiated simultaneously, I informed him calmly, presenting the second documentation package. Separate residence arrangements necessitated by unauthorized occupant introduction. His collapse from desperate authority to stunned recognition completed the power transfer sequence. The calculated control they had exercised through deception, now completely inverted through strategic implementation. You have 30 minutes to collect essential belongings, I informed Catherine clinically. Remaining items can be scheduled for retrieval during supervised access periods detailed in the documentation. Catherine's calculation shifted to pragmatic extraction, pride abandoned for practical efficiency. This isn't over. Documentation suggests otherwise, I replied simply. As she departed to collect belongings, Michael made final emotional appeal attempt. Everything we've built together was systematically undermined through deliberate deception, I completed calmly. Evidence thoroughly documents progressive betrayal implementation. My parents maintained professional witness positioning, their presence eliminating emotional manipulation opportunities, while providing documentation verification. Catherine returned with hastily packed essentials, calculation replaced by bitter pragmatism. Your performance was impressive, she acknowledged reluctantly. I underestimated you completely. Common strategic error, I observed without malice, mistaking composed response for weakness. Michael's final departure carried none of Catherine's grudging respect. His collapse from authority to desperation completing the confrontation arc perfectly. The control he had assumed permanent, revealed as entirely situational. His confident deception systematically dismantled through strategic precision. As the door closed behind them, My father placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. Executed flawlessly. Strategic implementation rather than emotional reaction, I acknowledged. Documentation prioritized over declarations. The house felt immediately transformed, not through physical alteration but fundamental energy shift. The space they had attempted to colonize through calculated deception, now reclaimed through methodical strategy. The confrontation they had believed they controlled had proceeded precisely according to my designed sequence. Their confident deception systematically exposed, their assumed authority methodically dismantled, not through emotional outburst but strategic precision, exactly as planned. The formal eviction notice gave Catherine 72 hours to remove all remaining belongings from my property. She scheduled the retrieval for Wednesday afternoon, the furthest permissible time within legal parameters, her final attempt at control assertion through maximum timeline extension. I arranged for 2 security professionals to monitor the process, their presence eliminating potential confrontation while ensuring comprehensive documentation of property condition before and after removal activities. Michael's increasingly desperate communication attempts followed predictable patterns, initial anger giving way to bargaining, then remorse performance as strategic options diminished. His text messages evolved from outraged accusations to carefully constructed apologies designed to trigger emotional response. "This is completely unreasonable. We need to talk like adults. Please just give me a chance to explain everything properly. I made a terrible mistake. What we had was real, is real. Please." I documented each message without response, adding to the comprehensive evidence file supporting divorce proceedings while maintaining strategic silence. Emotional engagement would provide negotiation openings I had no intention of offering. Catherine's possession removal proceeded with surprising efficiency, her pragmatic nature apparently overriding emotional considerations once strategic defeat became irrefutable. The security footage documented her methodical approach, expression revealing calculation rather than distress, as she systematically extracted her integration attempts. The changing locks immediately following their departure provided both practical security and symbolic transition. Physical manifestation of access termination, matching the emotional and legal boundaries simultaneously established. My attorney filed formal divorce proceedings the following morning, the comprehensive evidence package ensuring expedited processing, despite Michael's increasingly desperate delay attempts. His legal representation's initial aggressive posturing quickly moderated upon evidence package review, negotiation approach, shifting to damage limitation rather than asset contestation. They're proposing mediation rather than court proceedings, Sarah Harrison informed me during our Thursday meeting. His attorney recognizes the evidence strength against him. Expected strategic pivot, I acknowledged. Preference for private resolution rather than public documentation. Precisely. The comprehensive evidence compilation makes court proceedings distinctly disadvantageous for him. They're essentially requesting mercy rather than justice. I considered the options with practical detachment. Mediation provides expedited resolution without unnecessary resource expenditure. Acceptable approach assuming appropriate agreement parameters. The formal settlement offer arrived 3 days later, Michael's concession package significantly exceeding minimum requirements. Full property ownership confirmation, substantial financial compensation, complete responsibility for outstanding joint obligations, comprehensive confidentiality provisions. The desperation underlying the generous terms was transparently obvious. Reputation protection prioritized above financial considerations, career implications, driving concession scale rather than fairness principles. I reviewed the terms methodically, identifying emotional manipulation attempts disguised as generosity while recognizing strategic advantage in expedited resolution. With appropriate modifications removing emotional leverage components, the agreement provided efficient conclusion without unnecessary prolongation. Social consequences unfolded simultaneously through established relationship networks. Michael's reputation underwent significant recalibration as information disseminated through mutual connections. His carefully cultivated professional image, dedicated husband, ethical partner, relationship integrity, systematically undermined by documented reality exposure. Catherine faced similar reputation reassessment within shared social circles. her strategic miscalculation regarding my response capacity generating substantial credibility damage. The calculated confidence that had characterized her territorial expansion replaced by defensive reputation management. As consequences, expanded beyond anticipated parameters. Most revealing were the communication attempts from peripheral social connections, casual acquaintances, and distant colleagues suddenly expressing support or seeking relationship maintenance. The transparency of their mode of assessment, determining advantage alignment in the aftermath of significant social disruption, provided valuable insight regarding authentic versus strategic relationship classification. I responded selectively, maintaining cordial engagement with demonstrated authentic connection while allowing strategic relationships to dissolve through natural consequence progression. The social recalibration providing valuable ecosystem clarification previously obscured by accommodation patterns. The divorce finalization arrived without ceremony. Electronic notification from Sarah confirming process completion and legal status change. The systematic dismantling of our marriage concluded with the same efficient precision that had characterized its final dissolution phase. Michael's last communication attempt arrived that evening. Handwritten letter rather than digital message. Transparent effort at perceived authenticity through medium selection. I know it's too late to fix what happened, but I need you to understand. I documented the communication without reading beyond opening line, adding to the comprehensive evidence file before secure disposal. The strategic value of his perspective had diminished to irrelevance. His narrative significance terminated alongside legal connection dissolution. The house underwent systematic reclamation. Spaces Catherine had temporarily occupied thoroughly renovated. Design choices reflecting personal preference rather than compromise accommodation. Physical environment transformation, paralleling legal and emotional parameters. Professional consequences emerged for both Michael and Catherine within their respective fields, not through active intervention but natural reputation ecosystem adjustments, following demonstrated judgment deficiencies. His partnership track progression stalled indefinitely through trust deterioration. Her luxury real estate client relationships complicated by reliability perception modification. Throughout the dissolution process, I maintained methodical documentation while implementing strategic reconstruction. Professional advancement accelerated without accommodation limitations. Social connections recalibrated based on demonstrated authenticity. Living environment optimized for individual preference rather than compromise requirements. The calculated deception they had orchestrated ultimately generated liberation rather than limitation. Their attempt at control resulting in comprehensive defeat. 1 year after the confrontation evening, I stood in my completely transformed living room, morning sunlight filtering through custom-designed window treatments that had replaced Catherine's burgundy impositions. The home renovation had been methodical rather than reactive. Each space reclaimed through thoughtful design, reflecting personal preference rather than compromise accommodation. The property that had once been battleground for territorial assertion now served as physical manifestation of reclaimed independence, not merely residence restoration, but philosophical extension of personal boundaries established through strategic precision rather than emotional declaration. My professional trajectory had accelerated substantially following liberation from accommodation requirements. The regional director position I'd secured 3 months after divorce finalization represented significant advancement previously limited by relationship compromise necessities. The international expansion project now under my supervision carried both career advancement and personal development dimensions previously inaccessible. The financial settlement from divorce proceedings had been strategically reinvested rather than emotionally protected. Property portfolio expansion, retirement account optimization, and educational development funding, creating substantial security framework beyond single residence protection. Most significant was the relationship ecosystem recalibration, connections tested through crisis demonstrating authentic versus strategic classification with unmistakable clarity. The social network emerging from dissolution, containing fewer but significantly more valuable relationships based on demonstrated integrity rather than convenience proximity. The transformation is remarkable, Diane observed during her monthly dinner visit, gesturing toward the completely redesigned kitchen space. The entire energy has shifted. Strategic reclamation rather than emotional reaction, I acknowledged. Serving the perfectly paired wine selected for dining enhancement rather than strategic implementation. Each modification reflecting preference optimization rather than compromise accommodation. The doorbell announcement interrupted our conversation, package delivery providing unexpected confirmation of timeline significance. The International Design Award notification I'd submitted months earlier had arrived with perfect symbolic timing. Recognition of complete property transformation precisely 1 year following confrontation implementation. Appropriate verification of reclamation completion, I noted, examining the prestigious acknowledgement with measured satisfaction. Information regarding Michael and Catherine reached me through filtered channels, rather than direct knowledge. Their narrative progression holding anthropological interest, rather than emotional significance. Their relationship had dissolved precisely as anticipated. Strategic foundation insufficiently stable for duration sustainability. Once deception infrastructure collapsed. Michael's professional regression continued through natural consequence progression. Partnership track permanently derailed through demonstrated judgment deficiency. Lateral movement to smaller firm, representing significant status reduction within industry parameters. His repeated communication attempts had ceased approximately 4 months earlier. Strategic futility finally overriding emotional persistence. Catherine had relocated to another state following reputation ecosystem adjustments within local professional networks, her luxury real estate business reportedly rebuilding within new geographic parameters, though substantially reduced from previous achievement levels. The comprehensive defeat administered through strategic precision rather than emotional confrontation, apparently generating geographic retreat requirements. Most revealing was their narrative construction regarding dissolution, information filtering through mutual acquaintance channels, suggesting substantial reality modification in public presentation. Michael reportedly positioning outcome as mutual decision emerging from natural relationship evolution. Catherine apparently describing implementation as voluntary extraction from toxic situation. The contrast between their manufactured narrative and documented reality provided valuable insight regarding perception management priorities compared to authentic accountability integration. Their commitment to artificial construction rather than factual acknowledgement, confirming the strategic assessment that had guided my methodical response to their deception. Any regrets about the approach taken? Diane inquired. Professional psychologist perspective, seeking emotional integration verification. I considered the question with genuine reflection, rather than defensive dismissal. Strategic implementation generated optimal outcomes across all relevant parameters. Emotional reaction would have significantly reduced efficiency while providing potential leverage opportunities. Not the efficiency assessment, she clarified with gentle persistence. The personal experience dimension. Any wish for different emotional processing opportunities. The methodical approach permitted controlled emotional integration rather than reactive expression, I explained thoughtfully. Strategic precision facilitated comprehensive resolution without traumatic disruption patterns. Processing occurred systematically alongside implementation rather than chaotically alongside reaction. The evening concluded with comfortable connection rather than strategic consideration. Relationship quality reflecting authentic engagement rather than utilitarian assessment. The friendship that had provided critical support during strategic implementation now representing genuine connection rather than tactical alliance. Later, reviewing property transformation documentation for the design award submission, I recognized the parallel between physical space reclamation and personal boundary restoration. Each modification reflecting not merely aesthetic preference, but fundamental identity recalibration, following systematic extraction from compromise requirements. The strategic precision that had guided confrontation implementation continued informing reconstruction methodology, decisions reflecting comprehensive assessment rather than reactive impulse, modifications implementing optimized functionality rather than emotional symbolism. Most significant was the fundamental perspective transformation, viewing the deception experience as liberation catalyst rather than traumatic disruption, the systematic dissolution of artificial constraints, enabling authentic preference implementation across multiple life dimensions previously limited by accommodation requirements. My phone chimed with calendar notification, reminder of tomorrow's International Development Team meeting regarding expansion project implementation. The professional advancement representing not merely career progression, but philosophical extension of reclaimed decision authority, following extraction from compromise limitations. The property that had been deception battleground had transformed into authentic expression framework. The career previously limited by accommodation requirements, now accelerated through preference optimization. The relationship ecosystem, formerly containing strategic calculation, now refined to authentic connection. Michael and Catherine had orchestrated what they believed would be systematic control establishment through calculated deception implementation. Instead, their strategic miscalculation had catalyzed comprehensive liberation across multiple life dimensions, their attempted constraint becoming transformation opportunity, their deception platform becoming reclamation foundation, their control assertion becoming independence catalyst. The comprehensive defeat they experienced representing not merely consequence implementation, but fundamental recalibration of power dynamics they had incorrectly assessed through critical misconception. They had mistaken composed response for weakness, strategic patience for passive acceptance, methodical assessment for emotional limitation. Their most significant miscalculation believing control existed where only accommodation had been granted. The transformation complete, the reclamation comprehensive, the strategic implementation generating not merely dissolution resolution, but foundational reconstruction. A new beginning established through methodical precision rather than emotional reaction, exactly as planned.